Let's slam the sheriff's department again.
LA County Sheriff Alex Villanueva, who never backs down from a fight, running for re-election. 8 challengers who want to take his job say it's time for him to go.
As far as his performance as a sheriff, it's been a dismal failure.
Alex Villanueva is being defunded because of Alex Villanueva's mouth.
I don't believe the current sheriff deserves another 4 years, quite frankly.
With violent crime rising, it's one of the most talked about, the most important races in Southern California this year. To help you decide, CBS News Los Angeles presenting this special 30-minute program, the LA County Sheriff's Race. Hello everyone, I'm Ross Palombo. The race for LA County Sheriff is shaping up to be the most contentious, the most controversial, and perhaps the most critical race in the June primary. 6 challengers are all hoping to unseat the incumbent, Alex Villanueva. Now, in the next half hour, we'll introduce you to all of them, who they are, what they stand for, and why they say they deserve the job. But we begin with the current sheriff, initially swept into office by strong supporters, but now besieged with controversy from his substantial critics.
We got a long way to go. It's going to be a long night.
For the first time in more than a century,
I don't think we'll know the result of this thing.
incumbent LA County Sheriff may not win re-election.
We're going to keep our fingers crossed.
It was an election in question.
We don't know where those additional ballots are coming from.
Results are not going to change. This is going to flip back in his favor. That's not going to happen.
And even after his historic win and swearing in,
On which I'm about to enter.
with only the briefest congratulations,
The race for LA County Sheriff is now over.
it soon slid right back into an ongoing search for answers.
The reinstating of a deputy fired.
Almost immediately, Sheriff Alex Villanueva was under scrutiny, with reports of him at odds with the Board of Supervisors, traveling down a bumpy road for rehiring a fired deputy, raising questions with his watchdog, who Villanueva soon began blasting. His tenure eventually triggering reviews from the California Attorney General, a civil rights probe, a congressional panel later asking to probe deeper, even some of the public tagging him as Sheriff Trump, claiming he's the most hated man in Los Angeles.
Are you the most hated man in LA?
No, the political establishment wishes that I'm the most hated man.
The political establishment clashing with him over an alleged cover-up surrounding deputy photos of Kobe Bryant's death scene. Going to war with him on a coronavirus vaccine mandate after Villanueva fought against it. And probing the possibility of deputy gangs allegedly beating and executing and costing taxpayers millions.
Are there gangs at the Sheriff's Department?
Nope, never.
You're
have been.
100% sure there are no gangs?
I'm 100% sure.
What about these allegations that people are involved in these gangs and the initiation is to shoot a civilian?
Absolutely ludicrous. We have never found any evidence of that in any shooting, and that question has been asked.
He hadn't been asked by the Inspector General for months.
Failed to follow transparency and oversight laws.
Because Villanueva kept fighting against testifying in court until ultimately relenting just days ago. All this amid ongoing allegations of fighting transparency, withholding records, and defying subpoenas.
Why is the issue just speaking under oath?
Because the Inspector General said his specific goal is try to do a gotcha moment and then charge me.
And that is his overall complaint, that the Inspector General, the supervisors, and the district attorney are keeping him from getting the job done.
3 entities that you need to do your job. Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Can you do the job with all of this controversy and fighting?
Well, here's the thing. I've been doing the job in spite of all this.
On the job, he says he's disciplined nearly 1,000 people, terminated 145, reformed their regulations, and gotten 3,000 of them body cameras. In the jails, Villanueva has gotten U.S. immigration out and new reforms in, resulting, he says, in double-digit declines in inmate assaults and deputy use of force. But just last month, these 2021 images emerged of a deputy with his knee on an inmate and allegations of another cover-up.
Why didn't you come to the public when you first found out?
because it didn't rise to that level.
Now it's risen to a whole new level. The commander and assistant sheriff during the incident alleging Villanueva tried to cover it all up, charging the sheriff with obstruction, retaliation, and releasing false information on key details, like exactly when he first saw these images.
Is it really transparency, or is it selective transparency?
Not at all. We're complying with the laws the way they are written. At the end of the day, we're trying to make the community safer, and we're succeeding in that.
How are you succeeding in making the community safer? It sounds like you haven't succeeded in that.
Well, the numbers are going the wrong direction. In other areas, the numbers
Isn't that the metric?
In other areas, the numbers are going the right direction.
His own metric saying homicides jumped 94%.
On your watch. Is that a failure on your part?
Not at all. The pandemic happened on my watch as well. Civil unrest, defunding of law enforcement.
Is it defunding?
Yes, it's defunding, because the county is sitting on a $2.4 billion surplus.
All as the budget for his personal campaign has increased.
He's doing a good job.
Nearly $2 million, his staff says. A dramatic rise from the $27,000 he raised for his first primary, his first political ad.
I'm not a politician. I'm not a bureaucrat.
Now, nearly 4 years later, with so many of the same issues in front of voters,
Crime is up, morale is down, and recruitment is even lower.
the sheriff saying only the numbers have changed.
How have you changed since you've done that ad?
I'm the exact same person, never changed.
Well, many people say he is the exact same person. He came in as a disruptor, challenging the status quo, and that's what he's done while in office over the last 4 years. The question for voters now is, has it worked? The sheriff telling me that it has, and that he wouldn't change a thing even if he could. Well, coming up, some of those around him say Villanueva has changed, though, and that's why they're running. The former member of his own command staff who turned against him, and a current lieutenant who wants his boss's job next. Two candidates in this race are no strangers to this sheriff. Both of them worked with Villanueva, and both had conflicts with him. Both were eventually reassigned to less desirable positions, and now both of them want his job.
You went through those already? No. Yeah, that's him with my mom over here.
If a picture is worth 1,000 words,
That's pretty special for us.
then for Eli Vera, these photos speak volumes.
He had a look of fear in his eyes that I hadn't seen too many kids.
This kid had been brutally beaten by his father. The crime committed, Vera says, while he and his wife were on duty.
He was going to be deported. So his future was pretty bleak.
Christian's case became their cause. They fostered, then adopted him, changing his future and unknowingly changing theirs.
I think it brought us full circle.
It taught us the other side of the criminal justice system. You know, we were always on this side, now we're on this side. And it has helped shape my career and shape who I am today.
His career spanning 33 and a half years at LASD, the former Marine rising in rank to become a division chief.
Well, you were on the command staff. Right?
I was one of his chiefs, and that's where we started doing this, because he went in a completely different direction.
Vera supported, even campaigned for Sheriff Villanueva.
I've been a cop for 32 years.
But immediately after the election, behind the endless headlines claiming conflict and corruption, Vera was seeing an entirely new sheriff.
He's the most divisive person that I've ever met. I knew that we were pretty much done, and that my future was bleak in his eyes with the Banditos issue in East Los Angeles Station.
That was the breaking point.
That was a breaking point, yes.
Villanueva continually denying deputy gangs even exist, but Vera says it's a central issue and would be his top priority.
That is toxic towards public trust.
Do you believe these gangs are abusing civilians?
Yes, absolutely. I do believe that there's some that have behaved in a criminal manner.
And with overall violent crime soaring and the homicide rate doubling.
I was part of the efforts that reduce violent crimes in Los Angeles.
He's telling voters he has the experience to fix it. All that time at LASD until just a few days ago.
I'm the first chief in the history of the department ever to get demoted because I decided to run against the sheriff.
Is that illegal?
If it's politically motivated, yes, it is illegal.
And that makes it personal.
Christian.
Something his career has always been.
What does your son say about you running for sheriff?
He was a huge champion.
If you click on it, it'll say read more.
The picture is strikingly similar for candidate Eric Strong.
Your face always looks so serious almost.
The sheriff not only reassigning him.
Did you feel that was just personal?
I did.
But under Villanueva, his wife was also suddenly reassigned.
Told her she was being put under investigation and being transferred. Told her she was not to return to food services.
Transferred and placed under administrative investigation.
The 26-year veteran saying it happened after she raised issues with inmates being served moldy bread. She's now filing suit.
This involuntary transfer was retaliatory.
You announcing your candidacy had something to do with your wife's situation?
Absolutely.
Strong has absolutely stood out for years, now also directly opposing Villanueva on deputy gangs.
He's just making it worse by denying it, and he's fueling it.
Is he lying when he says there are no gangs, there's no evidence?
Yes. I worked internal affairs.
At Internal Affairs nearly a decade ago, his investigation, he says, exposed the 3,000 boys deputy gang problem, ending with 6 deputies losing their jobs. And he says he can do it again.
I think I can. It is the product of a larger problem. And that larger problem is a lack of compassion, community respect, and poor leadership.
Leadership, he says, is all about community.
Those solutions are not going to be found inside a jail.
And despite his 3 decades of problem solving,
I think we have a pretty big problem coming from the top down.
His campaign is still asking the community for their solutions too.
This is the candidate who
cares and is listening. That's what I want people to know.
Well, a high-ranking source within the department telling me the sheriff was not involved in any of those decisions related to Eric Strong or his wife. They also say Vera's allegations of why he was demoted are flat out false. Coming up, 2 other blasts from the past have also had close calls with the sheriff, another former member of the command staff, and one of Villanueva's former close friends on why they believe he's got to go next. 2 more candidates are some of the harshest critics of the sheriff. One of them saying he was at one time Alex Villanueva's best friend, and the other a longtime veteran of LASD who helped put one sheriff behind bars and now says he'll take this one to task too.
Calls for Sheriff Alex Villanueva to resign grow louder.
It is a 2-minute, 12-second indictment of the sheriff.
Violent crime is way up.
And driving the case.
I worked for a man like this.
Is the very man who testified to help make a case against Lee Baca, putting him behind bars.
Corrupt and obsessed with power.
You think Sheriff Villanueva is corrupt?
I do. Absolutely.
Did Villanueva direct criminal acts?
It's possible. It's possible. We don't know how deep this goes.
What LAX Police Chief Cecil Rambo does know, what he's been running on, is how deep his roots go in the community.
And in 1959, they adopted me literally from a photo album and flew me over.
Flew him from Korea to Compton. He grew up here and in South LA and knew the area so well that by the time he became a jail deputy, he also knew many of those coming in.
And so that was interesting, you know, seeing folks in there that I actually knew.
Certainly, this had a big role in shaping who you became as a deputy.
You know, it was just natural for me to want to give back to the community and work with the community. And I'm from the community, they're part of me.
Rambo drew on that part of himself to establish the community-oriented policing program at the LA County Sheriff's Department and used it to fight violent crime, gangs, and homelessness, techniques still used today.
The team that he has now, I created back in 2004.
Are those programs still running the same way you envision them?
He kind of eroded it by going into a whole area that's not his, the city of Los Angeles.
How are you doing?
And clearly it was a publicity stunt.
It is why he's running, to bring community back to crime fighting. And with his 33 years of experience at 3 agencies across the very county he grew up in, Rambo is now looking to serve as sheriff, saying he remembers how to get it done because he's never really forgotten where he came from. You believe you have more heart?
I think so. It's not just necessarily the heart, it's just that I feel so much a part of it.
It's been a lifelong journey. We did all this work together. That was me as a young patrol deputy. Now here we are, competitors.
Candidate Matt Rodriguez knows Chief Rambo and knows the former sheriff that Rambo helped put away even better.
This is me with Lee Baca at one of the academy graduations.
During his 25 years at LASD, he was an early supporter of Lee Baca, along with then best friend Alex Villanueva.
Alex and I, we supported Lee Baca. There's me there as a staff instructor at the academy, and that's Alex Villanueva. We were partners on the same staff.
Has he changed a lot since then?
I don't know the man anymore.
And what he says he knows of Villanueva now is not good.
I think it's disastrous. It's event after event. I don't think he created any trust. I think the way he's handled the homeless issue is pure political theater. Why are you so confrontational? And I kind of sat back, watched the George Floyd situation, and said, you know what, I'm running for sheriff.
His number one issue is crime, and he says with the most education in the race, 4 degrees, he can think through a solution.
Conservatives, okay? People who believe in the rule of law.
He's also the only declared Republican in the race, building a campaign on conservative values.
Do you think that might give some voters in LA County pause?
I think so. I mean, let's face it, this is a Democrat centric community.
But that part of the community has now distanced itself from Villanueva, calling him the Trump of LA.
So is he the Trump of LA?
His attitude is such that, he does mirror Trump in a lot of ways.
Or are you the Trump of LA?
I'm not the Trump of LA.
Do you want to be?
No, I do not want to be known as the Donald Trump of Los Angeles. This is the Honor Guard, and that's Alex Villanueva there, and that's me.
Even though their shared past exposed them to many of the same things, he believes the picture for him now has developed differently.
I'm the antithesis to Alex Villanueva.
Well, Matt Rodriguez says he has the most varied experience, including time as a city administrator and director of public safety in the city of Commerce. Cecil Rambo is the current police chief at LAX, and both of them say working outside of LASD has given them perspectives that the current sheriff just does not have. Coming up, our final 2 candidates also have distinct differences from the current sheriff, the only candidate who has never worked at LASD and the first female to run next. The final 2 candidates have led during some of the most difficult times over the last 2 years, both commanding hundreds of officers and deputies during riots and protests across the Southland. One of them succeeding in her department because of what she learned from years of experience. The other learning from his hard experience during those riots and the looting to succeed moving forward.
We had several thousand protesters.
6 days after the death of George Floyd.
They grew violent.
And Long Beach was feeling the pain.
People saying, where are the police?
Amid these images of fire and looting and destruction.
I know we're seeing some very disturbing images on TV.
An emotional police chief.
I hope they disturb you. They're very much disturbing us.
Was feeling it more than most.
You had individuals who came into the group and started to vandalize vehicles, throw items at police officers, and start looting stores.
Do you remember that moment?
I do.
You were emotional in that press conference, weren't you?
I was, because I care.
The city suffered a lot of damage.
It did.
Your police department had damage as well, right?
It did.
Is that a failing on your part?
I don't believe it was a failure, but it's definitely cause for concern where you have to go back and you have to be open enough to assess yourself.
And making those assessments an asset is a central theme in Robert Luna's campaign.
I'm a lifelong learner. and you get the job done.
That's how he says he got the job done in Long Beach with recent crime, assessing each individual neighborhood and responding with targeted foot patrols.
We engage the community on a very different level in some of the most violent reporting districts, and it worked.
Worked to keep Long Beach's homicide rate flat, he says, while the county's murder rate jumped 94%.
Were you shocked by that number?
Shocked and disappointed to hear that, because those are not just numbers, they are lives lost.
From the experience he's gained in Long Beach, he says he'll bring new solutions to stop those losses. He's the only candidate who's never worked at LASD.
Let's get in there and change the way things are.
He's now campaigning as an outsider while telling voters about his inside experiences, growing up in East LA, being inspired by county deputies to enlist in the Marines to eventually become an officer himself.
You really need an outsider to come in and work with the people that are there, work with people outside the organization, which includes the community and subject matter experts, to put it back on track.
He has 36 years of policing and management experience behind him.
People are going to go to jail.
And much of it, both problems and solutions, playing out in public.
What we did in Long Beach, I want to carry to Los Angeles County, to go in there and make a difference.
In the wake of Floyd's murder, similar protests were happening across LA County.
All of a sudden, you have 15,000 people.
And retired LASD captain Britta Steinbrenner was right at the center.
But you were ready.
We were ready.
She commanded the hundreds of deputies directly dealing with it.
They're in civil unrest.
And says she's the woman behind the sheriff's claims of success.
Every area that was patrolled by the sheriff's department, that stuff didn't happen.
He went for the photo op, and then he disappeared, and my team was left to be out there, do the work.
Do you think he was taking credit for your success?
He takes credit for everyone's success.
But now Steinbrenner is seeking the spotlight.
So you are the first female candidate for sheriff?
Yes. And will be the 34th sheriff, first female sheriff, if elected.
She's been pushing that boundary since the beginning.
We were the 7 females that were in the back.
Becoming a deputy in 1986 when there were only a handful of women.
So there was a lot of getting used to having a female.
Did you feel like a trailblazer?
Yes.
The Times found you.
And I would agree with that.
The global pandemic finding her commanding the sheriff's department response at all 6 county hospitals.
Were people looking to you to lead them in an emotional way?
It was working together and really caring about what was going on.
It's that sense of caring that she believes brought deputies to her.
They said, please, you have to run.
When they came to you, did you again think the Times had found you?
It started making me think it's time for change. We've had the same 33 male sheriffs, and now it's time to completely change the culture.
Her culture seen in her campaign.
Do you like green eggs and ham?
Where reading to children and meeting parents.
I have 4 children.
Put her right at the center of the community she wants to protect.
We have to be back in the community. We're there to protect you. You come first.
And to Steinbrenner, it's another first that matters.
Is now the time for the first female sheriff, or is it way past time?
It's time now because we're ready. I've opened up the door of opportunity for other women and to give them the courage to go ahead and try something.
So in a way, you've already won.
So even when you think it's not going to happen, the unimaginable will happen and can happen.
Steinbrenner retired in order to run. Luna was already retired from Long Beach Police. Both have had some of the fewest recent interactions with Villanueva compared to the other candidates, but both are just as firmly convinced as the others that the current sheriff needs to be replaced. Well, those are all of the top candidates. For more information on this and all of the races on the June 7th ballot, take a look at our voters guide. It is always on and always online at cbsla.com. I'm Ross Palombo. We'll see you election night.